Salwete Diskipuli. In this video, I'd like to address some of the problems that I saw in the class translations of our reading passage for Module 2 about Queen Boudicca. If you have comments on your submission regarding sentences being mistranslated, this is the film that you will need to listen to in order to know how to fix those mistranslations. Resubmit, please, and make sure that you are doing the resubmission with the eye towards learning how to translate Latin more effectively. There are two problematic words in this lesson, and they are the noun Britannia and the noun Britanni. So let me talk real quickly about both of these vocabulary words. First of all, Britannia, Britanniae. This is a place name, Britain, or you may say Britannia. This is how the Romans would have referred to it, Britannia. We today call it Britain. So you have the choice of using either translation when you write the passage into English. It is important to note that this is a first declension noun. This is important because as you encounter the word throughout the text and you focus on the inflection, knowing that it is from first declension is what will help you distinguish it from the other noun on our list, which looks very similar, and that is Britanni, Britannorum. When we look at this noun, you might feel that it doesn't fit into any of the noun declensions that we have studied thus far, first or second declension. However, if we remember that this first word is always the nominative form, and that the second word is always the genitive form, we should recognize these endings as the nominative and genitive plural of second declension. And in fact, this is a plural noun. That means it exists in the plural. And this noun is referring to the people of Britannia, otherwise known as the Britons. And sometimes in English, we simply say the British. So all of those are potential ways to translate these two words. It is important that you focus on the ending so that we are able to understand what the sentence or who the sentence is talking about, the place or the people. Let's highlight a few of the uses of these two words throughout the paragraph. In the opening sentence, in Insula Britannia, we have the first declension noun, which is simply being used to rename the insula. It is in English what we call an appositive, which is a noun simply identifying or renaming another noun. To translate this into English, it is acceptable to say on the island of Britannia or on the island of Britain, even though Britannia is not written in the genitive case. In English, it sounds better just to insert the word of, but it is perfectly acceptable to say on the Isle Britain. While we move into the second half of the sentence, you should notice very readily that the second word ends with this letter I, which directly connects it to the noun referring to the group of people. So here you might say the Britons or the British, or you could even say the people of Britannia. And most people like to place this clause at the beginning of their translation, because I think they feel that it has a better sound to say the Britons were living on the island of Britain, or Britannia. Remember that you are not restricted to keeping the order of words in the same order that the Latin author uses them. It is acceptable to take clauses and phrases and move them about in the sentence to create the most appropriate sounding English translation. That is your ultimate goal, to have this sound like the most appropriate English translation that you can make. And when we move into our next sentence, we have Britannia, and notice that we have the letter I on the end, which makes it the name of the people. And as we move down to the end of the paragraph, we have Britanniae with the AE, and this AE indicates that we are looking at the place, not the people. So here we are looking at the place. Now I'd like to talk quickly about this particular sentence, nautai in fluvius Britanniae navigabant. And I would like to focus specifically on the prepositional phrase in fluvius, in the rivers, and then what we are supposed to do with Britanniae. Britanniae is a genitive case noun. Genitive case nouns should be used with either the noun that comes immediately in front of them, which in this case would be fluvius, or the noun that comes immediately after them. Since there is no noun immediately after Britanniae, we must use Britanniae as part of our prepositional phrase. So in fact, the prepositional phrase does not end with rivers, but with Britanniae. So in fluviis Britanniae is a phrase that must stay together, in the rivers of Britannia. As we move forward into the paragraph, we notice the word Britannorum again, and here we want to focus on the orum, which indicates that we are looking at the noun referring to the people. So, of the Britons, or of the British. As we scan the paragraph, I notice the word Britanniae once again here at the beginning of the third paragraph. The AE indicates to me that we are talking now about the place rather than about the people. And so this AE indicates that it's genitive, therefore it's going to work with populos, and that means that these two words have to stay together, that they make a phrase that we must keep together. In this sentence, we have Britannis. And so it might seem to you that, how am I supposed to know whether or not I'm talking about Britain or the Britons, because both words would use IS in the dative or ablative plural. This is true, but if you look at the base of Britannia, and I'll underline that for you to draw your attention to it, we see that it ends with the letter I. So if I were going to add an IS to Britannia, I would have a double I. In this particular word, Britannis, I have only one I. And when I look at the base of Britanni, I'll underline that for you, you should notice that there is no I on the base. So Britannis is in fact referring to the people themselves. And we have the same thing happening here. It's easier to recognize that this is the people rather than the place, because the inflection on this noun is from second declension, and Britanni, Britannorum is the noun of this pair that is from second declension. Here we see Britannorum, and I'm going to focus on the inflection, which is orum. Orum is from second declension, and that means that we are looking again at the noun referring to the people rather than the place. When we drop down to Britannorum again, beneath that sentence, we see once more orum. This genitive plural ending is from second declension, which means we are talking about the place, not the people. In the final sentence of the paragraph, Britannos ends with the inflection os. Os is from second declension, so I'm referring to the people rather than the place. So this is the thought process that your mind has to get into when you are reading Latin. Being able to translate Latin into English is not just about understanding the meaning of the words, but also about looking at their construction, their inflections, their declension. All of those things join together to help you make a determination about what the right word choice is in English. Now I'd like to pay attention to some sentences that caused people some difficulty as they were translating. One of those first sentences was this second sentence of the second paragraph. Regina bona erat, et Boudicam reginam populi amabant. There are two things to notice about this sentence. The first one is that it has two verbs, erat and amabant. Whenever a sentence has two verbs, it is expressing two ideas, each in its own clause. A clause is a group of words in Latin or in English that contains both a subject and a verb. So for every verb in a Latin sentence, you have a clause or a separate idea being expressed. It is our task to learn where both of these clauses are in the Latin sentence. How are we supposed to know where they begin and end? There are a couple of clues. The first clue has to do with this conjunction word, which is the word and. Conjunctions join together words or they join together ideas or clauses. In this particular sentence, the word and is joining together clauses. How are you supposed to know whether it's joining together words or clauses? You're going to have to look at what comes on either side of it. If I were to see Boudicam here after the word and a noun right in front of and that is also in the accusative case, then and would be joining together those two nouns. When and joins together two nouns, those nouns have to be in the same case. But that is not the situation here. I have a verb and then I have a noun. So what I've got going on is and joining together two separate ideas. The first idea begins with Regina and ends at amat. The second idea begins with Boudicam and ends at amabant. Why is this important? These words that appear in the brackets must stay together. You are not permitted to take anything out of those brackets and move it anyplace else in the sentence. So these three words make a simple statement, and the words that come in the next set of brackets also make a simple statement. Remember that your task is to make each simple statement sound like the most appropriate English that you can. So if I take the first bracket and say Queen Good was, that doesn't make any sense in English. So I have to phrase it in a way that does make sense. Remember that in English, we begin with a noun as the subject. So Regina, which is in the nominative case, is our subject. And in English, we always place the verb next. So the Queen was, and then we want to know what she was, and we finish the idea with the adjective bona. The Queen was good. When I get to the next part of my sentence, it's very important to remember that when I'm reading Latin, I must focus on the inflections of the nouns. Notice that the first two nouns that begin this sentence are in the accusative case. That means they are a direct object. And in English, direct objects always come after the verb. So now I go to find my verb, which is amabant, were loving or loved. Now, who did the loving? Well, now I'm going to look for a nominative case noun, and I see that I've got populi here, which has an ending on it that is nominative plural. The ending on my verb is nt, and whenever you see nt on the end of a verb, that also means that it is plural and has to have a nominative plural subject or two singular subjects. So this is my subject, populi, and this is my verb, and then I'm ready to fill in the direct object. So the people loved Boudicca the queen, or Queen Boudicca. How are you supposed to know which one is right? That choice is up to you. That choice is up to you. When I look at this next sentence, some of you had difficulty understanding where to place the word Romanorum. So let's take a look at the fact that it is a genitive case noun, and remember that genitive case nouns must go with the noun that comes before it or the noun that comes after it. If we look at the noun that comes after Romanorum, it's the word Boudicca. Queen Boudicca was not a Roman. She didn't belong to the Romans, so it makes no sense to use Romans as the possessive of Boudicca. However, we should also pay attention to this comma right here, and that indicates that we're looking at a phrase that is introducing the sentence. And so all of these words must stay together. It also makes perfect sense that Boudicca did not like the Romans on account of the injustices of the Romans. And if you remember in the film, they committed many injustices in her mind. The injustice that they would not allow her to have the same deal as her husband did before he died, that they did not view her with the same level of authority that he had, that the injustice that they would not allow her tribe to maintain their independence and their own rules after her husband died, the injustices that they committed against her daughters. These are the injustices of the Romans that Boudicca was so angered by. When I look at the next part of the sentence, it is important to focus on the inflections of the nouns. We see A on Boudicca's name and os on Romanos. Romanos with the os is the direct object because that's accusative case, and that means you will have to use it after the verb in English. Some of you also fell trap to using Romanos as the subject of the verb known timet in the next sentence because it is the first noun in the sentence. Remember that we're reading Latin, and it is our job to focus on the inflection. Os is always an accusative inflection, and that means that when you phrase this sentence into English, Romanos cannot come in front of the verb but must be used after the verb. And the reason that's true is because in English, direct objects follow the verb. So the actual word order that you want to use is this: Boudicca non timet Romanos. The semicolon, which we see right here, indicates that what follows this idea is its own new idea. Some of you were confused about how to organize the words in this sentence. So let's talk a little bit about prepositions and how we are supposed to understand where a prepositional phrase begins and ends. Contra is the preposition, and when you look at your vocabulary list, you see and recognize this as a preposition because after contra it says plus accusative. That plus accusative or plus ablative helps us to recognize these Latin words as prepositions. So prepositional phrases always begin with a preposition. Where do they end? They end with the noun in the case that the preposition requires. Contra, if you look at your vocabulary list, requires an accusative case noun, and so that means it must end after Romanos. Those two words must stay together. You may place them wherever you would like within the sentence, but they must stay together. Against the Romans. The other OS that we have in the sentence is on the noun populos. That noun is our direct object because it does not follow a preposition. Because it is the direct object, we must use it after the verb excitat when we translate the sentence into English. Regina simply has a nominative case ending, so that will be our subject. The queen excites or incites the people against the Romans. What do we do with Britanniae? Well, we said earlier this is in the genitive case, and so we'll have to work with populos, people. So the queen excites the people of Britain against the Romans. Many of you translated this next sentence with these two ideas quite well using the notes that were given. That's a really good thing to have done. But some of you had difficulty with this second half, and I suspect it's because you weren't sure how to translate Britannia. And now that we know that we need to translate it as the people and not the place, what we want to understand is that Britannia is our subject. So the Britons obey the queen, and queen is in the dative case because the word obey must have as its object a noun in the dative case. Just an aside, isn't it interesting that our word parent is the Latin word obey? I find that somewhat interesting. The other sentence that gave people the greatest amount of difficulty was this sentence right here. And this sentence has a special situation because of the nouns castra and oppida. They both have the inflection A on the end of them. And if all we're doing is looking at inflections and remembering inflections, the very first inflection we learned was a, which is the nominative singular for first declension nouns. And so our instinct is to make these two nouns the subject of the verb. If we remember that NT is a plural ending on a verb, our verb supports castra and oppida being the subjects of the sentence. But you cannot make your decision based only on those two words, because if you are looking at your inflections, the letter A occurs in two more places on your noun chart. It occurs in second declension neuter with the nominative and the accusative plural. So the truth is that right now, just looking at only castra and oppida, we do not have enough information to make a decision about whether camp and towns are the subjects or the direct objects of the verb appugnabant. That means we have to look further into the sentence for more clues. And this is where a lot of beginning students just sort of give up. They want to make the decision right away. And the truth is, you can't always make the decision right away. When I look at Romanorum, I see a genitive plural ending. I am aware that genitive plural endings have to go with the noun that comes in front of it, that would be oppida, or the noun that comes after it, that would be copiae. I can't make a decision because how am I supposed to know if I'm talking about the troops of the Romans or the towns of the Romans? I still don't have enough information. I look at copiae and I see that it ends with AE. AE could be genitive. AE could be nominative plural. AE could be dative singular, indirect object. My verb is attacked. It's not give, show, or tell, so that wipes out indirect object. But at this point, I still do not know if it is showing possession or if it is being a subject until I get to Britannorum. Britannorum is the word that's going to unlock how to put together this entire sentence. Britannorum is in the genitive plural. Genitive case nouns must go with the noun that comes in front of it or the noun that comes after it. Hey, wait a minute. I don't have a noun after Britannorum. I've got a verb. That means that these two words must stay together. The troops of the Britons. The troops of the Britons. They don't possess anything in this sentence, but they do something. We're going to make copii the subject. The troops of the Britons attacked what? The camps and the towns. And in fact, if you look at this whole sentence, these are the only two words, castra and oppida, which have the potential of being a direct object. And our verb, attacked, has to have a direct object. They attacked. What did they attack? They have to attack something. These are the only two words, castra and oppida, which can be attacked. And copii is the only other noun in the sentence that can be the subject. So this is how we have to think about this sentence. Copii Britannorum serves as our subject. Aplugnabant is our verb. Castra et oppida Romanorum. I now know where to put Romanorum. It goes with those words. That set of words has to be used as the direct object or at the very end of the sentence. It was hard for me to believe, but some of you did mistranslate this second to the last sentence and indicated that it was the Britons who conquered the Romans. If you watch the film, we definitely know that is not true. If we look at the grammar, it's not supported by that either. Britannos is in the accusative, which means you must take this word and place it after the verb and say that the Romani superabant Britannos. You have to be able to do that. So those were the big problem areas that most of you had with this. If you have corrections that you would like to make, please make those, resubmit your translation, and I will take a look at it.